Ivan, this is Rohit from Lifestyle Mastery, and today I'm excited to have James Lowe, who's the founder of Mana. Mana are empowering tech leaders, career advisors, K-12 teachers, lifestyle gurus, and many others to host one-on-one sessions, offering live classes and build long-term follower bases who fund their work. Mana's raised $1.5 million pre-seed round led by Flash Ventures. Prior to entrepreneurship, James worked at SoftBank Vision Fund, advising world-leading technology companies like Arm and Uber on how to train sustainably where the crisis and leverage their capabilities for social good. He was also a McKinsey consultant serving consumer, private equity, and social sector clients on growth strategy. James has done his bachelor's from LSE. Welcome to the show, James.
Thank you so much. Great to be on.
Awesome. So you have a very interesting journey because you're in Hong Kong, and you rejected some of the offers from other universities, and you were running your charity, and you're part of the protest over there. How did that journey come on to going to SoftBank and getting into entrepreneurship?
Yeah, I found out I wanted to be an entrepreneur quite early in my life. I was 16 years old when I rejected all my university offers and went on the streets and became a protester. At the time, there was a massive protest in Hong Kong against national education, and there was a 13-year-old kid called Joshua Wong leading a massive protest. So I was leading a bunch of student unions, and we decided to go on the streets. It was quite crazy, and we were lucky, and the government retracted all their controversial policies. And so I was left with no university offers going, what am I going to do with my life? So I ended up starting a charity in Hong Kong that trained students in debating. I loved it. We had the Chief Justice come on board as our patron, and we had lots of great companies supporting us. So for the first time at like 16, 17, I started my first company. I was so young, I couldn't even sign the documents to register the company. So it's quite crazy. But we got it all set up, and that was how it all started. And I realized that education was what I was passionate about. I realized that entrepreneurship was something I wanted to go into. So in the following years, I eventually came to university in London. I studied politics, thought I was going to become some politician. That didn't work out. And so I ended up becoming a McKinsey consultant and sold out completely and did the corporate world for a while. And so I sort of transitioned between McKinsey and then back to the social sector a bit right after McKinsey, following a partner who wanted to start a youth employment charity. I worked there for a while. And then I moved to SoftBank Vision Fund because another McKinsey partner actually moved there and invited me to join him. And so at Vision Fund, I worked a lot with companies like WeWork and Arm on turning them around in the case of WeWork when the IPO was failing, and then with Arm working on expanding them into other countries. But then it was really towards the end of my time at SoftBank, around 7 or 8 months ago, I realized that I'd done a lot of the sort of big company stuff, a lot of the turnarounds, a lot of the interesting technology growth equity type things. But I really felt like I was veering quite far away from what I was truly passionate about, which was, again, in education and in entrepreneurship. And so I ended up deciding to take the leap. So yeah, that's how it all started.
Yeah, super interesting, and a lot of interesting, things you've talked about. When you moved to London and you got into McKinsey and SoftBank, how did you decide about looking at opportunities as an immigrant, and how did you get those opportunities in these companies?
Yeah, so McKinsey was genuinely it was an extremely lucky thing that happened to me. So for context, I applied to 3 jobs when I graduated from university, right? So McKinsey was one of them. And I actually got rejected from every other offer aside from McKinsey. So it was literally the only job, the last option I had, which is quite crazy. And it actually happened because when I was in second year, I was talking to a bunch of people who were quite interesting, who were sort of mentors to me. And one of them happened to be from McKinsey, and he was like, hey, you should try applying. It's actually a great place. You have no idea what you want to do. The political thing is not going to happen. You kind of need to find a commercial path. You need to find ways to maximize your exposure so you can figure out what you want to do later. So it was kind of my way of deferring a decision on what I wanted to do in my life. And so I ended up applying at the end of my second year. I got rejected at the final interview. I did reasonably well in the first interview, and then in my final interview, I just completely crashed because I had no idea how case interviews really worked. And once I hit a proper partner, it was like, oh my God, I just completely froze. But one of the partners actually really remembered me. And so the following year, when I applied for the full-time job, I emailed him and I was like, hey, I'm actually applying again. And he was like, oh, that's great. go for it. And so he actually allowed me to bypass one of the tests, and I sort of managed to go through to the interview stages earlier. And so, it went much more smoothly the second time around and finally got through. But yeah, when I got to McKinsey, it was really just a way for me to defer a decision on whether I wanted to go into entrepreneurship or go into corporate, anything like that, because I just had zero business understanding. I didn't do a second year internship or anything like that. So I had no idea what I was going to do. And it was a great testing ground to begin with.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because you followed up the next year and you got the job through. A lot of people just give up on the first rejection. So and that shows resilience. And how was your experience in SoftBank? And since you were trying to turn around companies, in SoftBank, and you also worked with companies like Ola and Uber in the growth strategies. What were some of your learnings in these high growth startups, and what are some of the growth strategies that they're using which can help out listeners who are trying to grow the companies?
Yeah, so I chose to go to SoftBank because it was such a unique opportunity. It was like a platform where you can pretty much, pursue your dreams and whatever you wanted to do. There was so much freedom in the company. And when I agreed to join that McKinsey partner who sort of invited me to come over, I basically recognized that there was no fixed role. I had no idea what I was going to do, and I would just jump in and figure it out. So, for my first 6 months, I was basically like a one-man show running investment operations on the SoftBank Group International side, because there was no one to do it, and they were like, "Hey, James, just go figure it out," right? So I ended up going to do that, and then after that, I actually moved over to the Vision Fund and worked very closely, initially with WeWork and then later with Arm. What I would say is basically, I don't think there's any sort of profound insights I could offer on growth, but I think there's two cautionary tales that I think everyone at SoftBank sort of figured out around that time. The first is that growth at all costs is extremely dangerous when you don't have the right governance around it, and the right type of leadership to drive it. And so we are in this amazing Silicon Valley culture where founders are worshipped, and often they're inspirational and they're amazing, and it is absolutely fantastic. But even the great founders, they need to surround themselves with great people and set up the structures necessary to prevent themselves from making bad decisions. And I think a lot of the hubris from the early stages of mass investing was that you kind of need to figure out what's the right governance structure to make growth at all costs work. And then the second piece is that we're increasingly in these markets where you kind of need to go international from day one. And it doesn't really make sense to set artificial geographical boundaries for what you do. It's a little bit different in some physical businesses. Like if you're trying to do, food delivery, transport, there's always going to be some geographical component to what you're doing. But even then, it actually makes a ton of sense to go international early. So even when you look at some of the latest 10-minute grocery delivery apps, they're basically hitting multiple geographies at once, because it is becoming a massive winner takes all type market. And if you can raise like big capital upfront, the imperative is to take a lot of geographical coverage so that you really have a footing in the market and go across quickly. So I see a lot of markets like this, and even when we're growing Mana right now, we never set geographical boundaries for ourselves, and we started from day one to be extremely international, and it's paid off lots of dividends in that, from day one, we had people from the Philippines, from Mauritius, from Malaysia, from the UAE, and we didn't really feel like we were London-based anymore. We could actually do a lot more things that way. So yeah, we have a unique opportunity to go global, but at the same time, you kind of have to grab that opportunity. That's what I'd say. But none of that is unique, glowing insight, I would say, but things that I've observed in my time there.
Got it. Interesting. And you pointed out that a lot of companies should go international, from day one. But do you think it's difficult to capture all markets at the same time? Should one focus on capturing one market and then looking at new markets? What is your thoughts on how should a company look at expanding into new markets? If they don't have the funds, or they're not backed by say SoftBank, for example.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think the key thing here is figuring out what are the markets where there's true commonality between the consumers in there. And I would say if you wind back 50 years, geography was a major determinant whether markets were homogenous or not, right? So people who live in India would have a very similar type of consumer preference. People who live in China would have a very similar consumer preference. And so as a result, expanding into each individual market was extremely high costs, lots of regulatory adaptation, lots of lingo and cultural adaptation. And each of those markets truly behaved very differently. And I think the consequence of globalization is that you basically have a lot of markets, removing the geographical boundaries, but where different niches now behave differently. So I think what I'm advocating is not so much that you go everywhere and every market at once and try to do everything. What I'm saying is that geography is less and less of a determinant of how markets are truly different, and that you could actually identify niches and verticals that are very cross geography and behave very similarly across geographies. So one classic example is gaming live streaming. A lot of people think it's a very American phenomena. It absolutely is not. The world's largest gaming live streaming markets are in the Philippines and the UAE, and then it comes to America, and then it's South Korea, and then it's, of course, China and some other big markets like that. You look at that, and the Filipino gamers and the UAE gamers and the American gamers actually have extremely similar cultural traits. And geography and language are not the biggest determinants. It's the niche culture that they're part of, and all the types of behaviors inside it. And you see some of the things in online platforms like Reddit, where you regularly see subreddits of people that are extremely international but have common interests and therefore behave very similarly. So what I focus on is instead, the markets that have lots of commonality that allow you to crack them in a similar strategy, instead of using geography as an artificial boundary, because it's increasingly less relevant over time.
I think that's interesting. You pointed about the gaming culture, and how there's a lot of cohesiveness in the in the patterns between among all these nationalities. And I want to talk about Mana. You part of the SoftBank Emerge Accelerator for diverse entrepreneurs, and you moved on from SoftBank, and what really made you build Mana, and what are you trying to solve by building Mana?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so when we first started Mana, the impetus is we wanted to create a world where everyone can make a living by sharing their passion. So the fundamental frustration is basically that you have this economy where tons of people work for 50 years in hierarchical corporates, and then you retire and then you die, right? And that was it. And people are very unfulfilled. The jobs were not exactly what they wanted, but they got forced into it to make money. And what the internet has created is this unique opportunity where almost any niche can find its audience. And now you also have these extremely diverse monetization tools, whether it's purchases that are one-off, things like subscription, things like tips in live streams, things like paying for a book by the chapter. Right? You have all these extremely diverse monetization mechanisms that didn't exist before. And so for the first time, any niche can find its audience. You've got all these monetization methods. And individuals can start turning themselves into a business and turning their passions into business in a much more easy way. So we wanted to build essentially the platform that allows that to happen in the easiest way possible. And so in essence, what our platform is OnlyFans for brains, right? It's basically anyone who wants to teach their skills. You can create your personal profile, you can offer one-to-one sessions, one-to-many live streams, sell digital content, sell your services, sell your creations, right? All of that in one. And it started in the sexual market for OnlyFans. It's worked very well for them, but we think it's going to be a massive thing for almost any vertical you can imagine. And so, yeah, that's the impetus for why we started it.
Yeah, I really like how you said it's OnlyFans for with brains. And when it comes to a marketplace, how did you going to solve the onboarding of creators, as well as people who could join and take advice from these influencers? What came first when you were trying to build it?
Yeah, so it's a classic chicken and egg problem. We started with the supply side. So we started with creators first. Our thought was that we have to have extremely high quality creators, be curated at least at the start, and eventually we can open up. But right now we want to be curated. And we figured that if we find people who either have very high credibility from their past experience or have a large following, the other side, the demand side of the equation will come. And so the way we started was actually just by writing a lot on LinkedIn. So I started writing about my personal story. I started writing a bit about why we started Mana, the team, and celebrating individuals that we hired in the team, stuff like that. And that was extremely helpful. It ended up with a lot of organic demand. So even to this day, we have not spent anything on paid marketing for Mana. So everything's come from organic demand. And we had lots of very interesting people sign up, all the way from people who are managing director at YouTube, CEO level people at Google, to people who are head of strategy at Airbnb, like stuff like that. And they started signing up because they've always wanted to run their side hustle. Or in some cases, they are going to start their own private business as a coach or as a advisor in many ways, and they want an easy platform for them to handle all of that. And so we kind of figured that there was this hidden market, so it started coming in more and more, and then each creator would then start recommending some of their friends, and so now we've got to the point where we really have no idea where some people have discovered us. Last week we had an Instagram creator who has 60,000 followers, who produces guitar videos and dark animation. And I have no idea how he discovered us, but he found out about us, and he's now joining. And there are lots of influencers and creators of that type, whether it's high credibility or high following. Yeah, it all started from a few LinkedIn posts.
Interesting, because I discovered about you from the LinkedIn post, and you've done a great job in content marketing. And what suggestion would you give to people who are looking to stand out from other creators? And how do I add a spiky point of view in order to stand out from so many people who are putting out content on LinkedIn or any other social media platform?
Yeah, my only advice is be extremely authentic. I think the key for us was that we never thought of it as marketing. We never thought of it as we need to maximize the audience and measure how many posts are generating the right demand. None of that. And we didn't do that because we realized the moment we start measuring ourselves that way, we would start trying to shove like links into every post. We would start trying to put the sign up link somewhere or recommend some individual and stuff like that. And that's actually what decreases the demand. And what you want people to do is they want to be interested in you as a person, or interested in the idea that you're talking about. And as a result, organically start clicking through your stuff and start figuring out all the things they want to find out. So our strategy is basically be extremely authentic, be very open with both the ups and downs of the company, tell individual stories of how things happened, and be extremely human in that process. Right? Talk about the emotions, talk about the sort of origins of why we made certain decisions and stuff like that. That's what captured people's attention. And one final bit of advice, I think I saw this from a guy called Sean Puri, who's a pretty famous Twitter guy, and I thought he had a great piece of advice, which is every time you post something, instead of thinking about what you want the user to do, which is often how marketing thinks about things, like there's a CTA, what we want to do, think about what you want the user to feel, because most of the time it's the posts that make them feel angry or emotional or empathetic or inspired. Those are the things that make them then go pursue an action. And so how can you trigger the right emotion with your words? That's more important than trying to direct them to a specific action. So yeah, that's, I think, served us well so far. But I can't say I've cracked the full model, but it's been working very well for us in acquisition.
Yeah, I think being authentic and triggering the right emotion. I think I really liked it, and I'm a big fan of Sean Puri as myself. I think he's done a great job in creating the right sort of content on Twitter. And on Mana, how can a creator monetize? Do you have any payment gateway which is linked, and would they have to? How does the whole process really work out for a creator if he wants to monetize?
Yeah, so we've got full calendar, payment, and video integration on the platform. So if you host a one-to-one session, you could use it as a Calendly, right? There's full calendar integration. You can integrate all your calendars and check availability as well. So all that is there. Payments is all done through Stripe, and so you could take the money from there. The video is integrated, so you can host a video session on Mana itself as well. And then for digital content, it's very much the same thing. Again, you set your pricing. You can control what you're going to sell, and then Stripe does all the payments. At the end of each month, we do our payouts, and for the countries that are covered by Stripe, we pay out through Stripe. If it's a country that's not covered by Stripe, we do it through TransferWise. But either way, yeah, all the financial pieces are integrated on the platform.
Correct. And when it comes to creators, how much of a weekly commitment or a commitment from the creator has to be there on Mana? Do they have to spend a lot of time, doing the sessions weekly or monthly?
Yeah, it heavily depends on the creator and what they want to do. So a big part of the ethos is basically just empowering the creator to do what they want to do. So we have a huge range. We go all the way from senior executives who really have only time for like 1 to 2 hours a week. So we have like partners of Latham and Watkins, or proper lawyers, to like the chief commercial officer of Founders Factory. They spend like 2 hours a week talking to people, and so they can restrict it like that. All the way to people who are full-blown influencers or professional coaches. They literally do this as a job, right? And they do, 5 to 6 hours, sometimes like 8 hours of calls, every day sometimes, right? So you could go, the whole range. And what we're trying to invest more time on now is doing things that also scale for the creator. So the reason why we created digital content and sellable digital content is that you can create the content once and just start selling it again and again. We're going to one-to-many live streams soon, and that will basically give people the ability to host classes and courses. And that, again, is obviously much more scalable. And so, yeah, it's basically in the creator's hands. We want to give you the most amount of freedom possible, and then give you diverse methods of monetization. And then hopefully you can, make the monetization work for you.
Correct. And you mentioned that creators can decide on the pricing, but do you also help creators to decide on what is the right sort of pricing? Because you don't want to a creator to price it too low for people to feel that it's not valuable, or to price it really high. What are your thoughts on pricing strategies for creators?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So we gave them the freedom. We absolutely still give guidance to all the creators about this, and so we spent a lot of time on a creator guide on Notion that basically gives a lot of detail on how you succeed as a creator, how you could price yourself, what the general pricing ranges are for different types of content, and it's quite interesting too because you see broadly 3 types of pricing on our platform, right? So the first type are these influencers who are essentially engaging their fans. And so they tend to have very short sessions, things like 5 to 10-minute sessions, and charge something like $20 for that amount of time, right? So when you convert it to an hourly rate, it's actually a lot of money. But then, because it's short and the intention is not so much to go very deep in the subject, but just a chance to meet that influencer you always wanted to meet, that pricing starts to make sense. So you have this influencer type pricing. Then the second type are these, professional coaches / young professionals who are providing, quick mentorship sessions. And often they vary between offering things for free sometimes because they just want to mentor, to offering something for money and then saying they'll donate that money to an organization. So we actually have a donation function on the platform as well. So often they will earn something like $20, $30 for an hour, sometimes up to the maximum around $100 an hour. But they would sort of balance it out between things they want to donate and things they want to charge. And then you have the high end of the market, which are usually senior executives who are providing real proper advice. And there it's more similar to the GLG alpha sites, like expert network type things where people are charging like $500 for an hour. But what they do is like really deep expertise. So pricing is very different depending on the market you're in. And one of the nice things about being the platform we are is that we're less about getting people to come to Mana and then find the expert. It's more about the creators setting up their profiles and then attracting audiences through their existing networks. And so people see like very different pricing depending on the type of creator they're attracting. So yeah, that's broadly how pricing works today.
And James, when you're building the product, how did you get to figure out, what's the right product market fit for your startup, and what is the single most important metric, or like the North Star metric that you target with your team?
Yeah, so I don't think we've cracked it yet, but in our short term, we basically created like 3 key North Star metrics for us. The first is we want to reach 1,000 completed profiles in our target audience. So today we have like 2,200 creators who've signed up. Of those, we selected around 400 to be part of the platform. We're going to boost that number to around 1,000 so that we really have people who are curated, but in that target audience who are fantastic. And then, so we've done a bunch of work also defining that target audience. So we look at nutritious, purposeful creators. And that spans a lot of different types of people. It goes all the way from, people who are helping you get into better careers, get into better jobs, and so on and so forth, all the way to things like living better by, better wellness, better beauty, better fashion, better DIY, like stuff like that. But the common theme there is basically people who have a how-to content that help their audience become better versions of themselves. So we want to reach 1,000 creators in that area. And the second piece is we have monetization effectiveness metrics. At the top level, we want between 10 to 20 lighthouse use cases of creators who have earned more than $1,000 within a 3-month span of joining Mana. And for these people, it's just to demonstrate that there's actually great monetization. And then under that, we're also tracking average monetization across the platform. So this includes things like the follower to monetized audience ratio. So basically how many followers you have in your existing social media platforms, and then how many paying customers you have on Mana, so that we could figure out what the conversion rate is. And we want to beat the average for that on platforms like Patreon, which typically have 1 to 2% conversion. So we want to beat that number. And also, of course, the sort of percentage of creators on Mana who are currently monetizing, right? So how many are actually monetizing? And then within that, what's the percentage who've actually achieved more than the average minimum wage, and then more than the average household income over an annual span? So these average monetization metrics help us figure out how we compare to the existing social media platforms, things like Patreon, YouTube, and so on. They're already well measured on these things, and we want to prove that we're a better monetization platform than those. And then finally, we also set a bar for our user experience as well. So we again want 10 to 20 lighthouse use cases for our learners. We ask them about what their intentions are before they start booking sessions, and then whether they actually achieved that intention, what those outcomes were, and how it's changed them. And we're also toying around with, we haven't decided whether to do this yet, but basically deciding on a metric that's something like every key action of Mana takes no more than 3 clicks to achieve. And right now, that's actually true for booking a one-to-one session, for example, leaving a review. Those things are true, but we haven't really measured that for other things. So we'll figure it out.
Interesting that you're looking at a lot of different metrics and you're tracking it well. And you talked about social media versus the monetization metric, which is 1 to 2%. And do you think as a creator, it's important to have build your own email list or something which you can control, and do you help your creators build some sort of an email list on Mana, or is it something they have to do separately?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a big part of the ethos of Mana is to empower creators, give them control over their audience. And so in our case, all the contacts that you build, we're now building out the sort of email list and subscription functionality to that email list, for our creators. And we're also going to build all of that audience data to be exportable over time, right? So we want people to be able to move between platforms easily. And we're also exploring other monetization methodologies, and these are things we're thinking about, haven't actually implemented yet. But things like, even when we actually introduce ad revenue at some point in Mana, we want to split it between creators and actually users, right? So the thought is that right now you have these platforms where companies pay for ads, creators get 55%, and then the platform gets 45%. But the user, the money was actually spent to acquire, never gets any of that money. And then the user basically just spends money on creator content and on the platform itself. So that's kind of crazy to us. So when we do release ad revenue, we're thinking about actually, getting the user to be able to receive part of that ad revenue, and then being able to redistribute that ad revenue to the creators they really like, right? So being able to spend it on the people they like. So a lot of this, but you can see at the core of it, the ethos is that we want to empower the creators. So give them control over their audience list, give them the ability to export their data, and then on the other hand, giving the users more autonomy as well, and getting appropriately rewarded for the attention they're spending on created content.
Correct. And I wanted to understand, what do you think could be, since we're in the we've been remotely working across the world for more than a year now. What are your thoughts on the future of education and unbundling of education as well as companies? You talked about that you don't need to work in a company for 50 years now, and the span of working in companies is becoming shorter now. But what are your thoughts on unbundling of these companies? And do you think it's going to be more of a creator or freelancer model going forward?
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. So Mana itself is built to be a fully remote company forever. And
Okay.
so we have spent a lot of time figuring out documentation, figuring out team socials, figuring out how team meetings could work, and all of this built around being a fully remote company forever. And within that fully remote culture as well, we have a good mix of like permanent employees and contractors. And we don't think of contractors as purely people you spend money on and they can leave anytime, not like that. But as in, even when they leave, they feel like alumni of Mana and they could always come back when they want to. So, one of the people who on our team who's like really fantastic, he was with us in the first 4 months of the company. Then, he got an internship at Spotify, so he decided to go there. And after a while, he was like, actually, I want to come back and work for Mana for a bit, and he's coming back, right? It's very fluid in that, you can have people coming in and out all the time. What's critically important, though, is that you have a strong sense of culture and you have a few permanent employees who are managing and leading the team at the core of it. This then translates into a lot of our thoughts on what unbundling companies actually means. So our thought, and the reason why we keep reiterating the company mission to help people make a living by sharing their passion, is that over the next 100 years, we're going to shift from this company-based industrial economy into a person-based passion economy, where lots of individuals can turn themselves into business. And critically, right now, a lot of the creator economy on YouTube and Instagram, all sorts of things, they're still very focused on the individual, right? So the whole idea is that each individual is a unit, they have their personal channel, they make money on their own, and that's it. But
Right.
what we think is going to be the next big thing is like, how do you get these individuals to collaborate with each other? And how do you build the infrastructure to help them not just collaborate, but get a lot of the traditional benefits that companies offer people? So you can imagine things like healthcare, insurance, your pension, all these types of things, which traditionally companies offer. So you need to start figuring how that works out for independent workers. You need to figure out the collaborative structure for them to work together, as I mentioned before. And as this starts to happen, you become, this alternate reality where companies are no longer really the dominant way where people have to work together. Instead, you have these fairly decentralized, autonomous organizations where, you have a few people who are initiating a project. They're the center of it. They're managing it. They're leading it. But at the same time, you can have, people who are dedicated and passionate about that topic to collaborate with you to work on those. And they don't get bound, in a company full-time employment contract forever. They can choose to work on it when they want to, and then when their commitment lowers down, they can move out a little bit more from there. And so for Mana, it's the same thing, right? Our team itself has a mix of people who are full-time and people who are part-time. And over time, we don't expect to have an office. Instead, if we ever did have anything that resembled an office, it would be something like a Mana house where you would have creators on the platform and like team members of Mana who are able to interact in those spaces together and work together. So we'll never truly have like proper offices, but instead you just have ways for people to collaborate, and you blur the lines between people who are employees or team members of Mana versus people who are actually users of Mana. It will be very similar as the same thing. So yeah, that's our vision of the world, but we believe that more and more people are going to be able to get freedom back in their careers to make a living by sharing their passion. And then we're going to build the infrastructure around them for collaborations and basic rights like healthcare and finance and pensions that enable that economy to work.
Interesting. And when you talk about the remote work, there's definitely a culture change where people would want to work in remote first companies. But do you think going forward, maybe by next year, a lot of companies would ask employees to go back to working in offices? And what are your thoughts on how companies and employees would look at dealing where they would have to go back to a 3-day or 5-day work week?
Mhm. Yeah, so I think we're already seeing that with a lot of traditional corporations, especially investment banks. You see J.P. Morgan, Morgan Stanley saying you've got to go back. You see some of the big tech players, especially people like Apple, who spent so much money building that amazing spaceship office, and now they're going, you have to go back. So that's already happening. My personal opinion is that you kind of go one of two directions. You either go full on office, always physically in the same place, or you go fully remote. I think in general, blending the two is probably a mistake. So if you went fully physically in person, there are enormous benefits of that, of course. Like you get a lot of water cooler chats, you get really good team camaraderie, you can build great team socials together. You have a lot of unintentional culture that starts building. There are downsides to that of people getting less freedom, having to travel, all sorts of things that were already well documented. But you get a lot of the benefits concentrated. Fully remote, you can now hire internationally like the best talent around the world. You can get people to collaborate, across different time zones and therefore cover more time zones than you did before. With good documentation, you can actually allow new onboarded people to onboard even faster than in a physical environment. You have much less politics because of the lack of this sort of closed space environment where people are seeing each other all the time. And of course, you get much better employee mental health. People are able to balance their lives much more and get more freedom in their lives. There are obviously some large downsides here as well. Like it's much harder to build culture properly. It takes a lot of conscious effort to do it. There are some downsides around, especially employees who don't necessarily have enough income to, get a good place to work from and so on. So you have to cater around that and find spaces from the work in some cases. But by and large, fully remote has enormous benefits that can be unlocked. The problem, I think, is in this hybrid model. When you have hybrid, you kind of get the worst of both worlds without really extracting the benefits. You get the worst of both worlds because you get a lot of the politics. In fact, the politics amplifies itself because you have all these people who are remote and they're going, wait, all the people going to the office are getting all the attention. Now I'm not getting it. It's pretty bad that way. It's hard to manage as a team because you don't make the conscious effort to document everything in the way a fully remote company actually does. You don't change the way you socialize and the way you organize collaboration in the way a fully remote company does. And so you have these like physical based infrastructures that then have to cater to remote. And it just becomes a nightmare. And I see a lot of people working in companies where they say, "Oh, come into the office 2 days a week, and then the rest of the week you're remote, and then you can choose which 2 days of the week." And in the end, the bosses are like, "Wait, I don't know who's in or who's out." There's lots of politics building the people who are in. There's lots of cliques building, but the culture is not actually developing. The documentation's all over the place. It's a nightmare. And so in general, I'm more of an advocate of going one of the extremes instead of trying to blend them together.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Either one should be totally remote, or an employee should go to the offices. That totally makes sense. And there've been a lot of boom into passion economy companies, and the two part to the question. Which creator economy company do you think has done a great job in building maybe the next unicorn, and do you think it's a difficult space to crack, and do you think there'll be a lot of VC money going into this sector going forward?
Yeah, so on the first part of the question, there are three that I really admire. Maven.com, which is doing cohort-based courses, and obviously two fantastic founders, knee-deep in education for years, both with like Wes Cow, understanding CVCs from the ground up, to Gagan Vianney, obviously like Udemy and knows the market inside out. They've done a fantastic job generating tons of like money for their creators already. I think they generate something like 4 million already, in the short space of less than a year. And so, they've done a fantastic job building that out. Another one is Koji. So it was actually started up as a gaming company. They're now going to the BioLink space, and they turned their gaming app store into all kinds of apps you can apply to a BioLink. I thought it was a super smart approach. And overnight, they became a really powerful competitor to people like Linktree and Beacons.ai, because those people are trying to build these features one by one, and they just have this massive app store with like thousands of apps that could be applied to BioLink overnight. So I thought that was fantastic. And then the final one is FanHouse. I think they are, really like at the forefront of the battle to get platforms to concede more revenue back to creators. They have a fantastic founder market fit, and crack this sort of SFW OnlyFans model for influencers who want to be tighter engaged with their audience. And that's been really cool to see as well. So those three companies, really admire them, think they've done a really fantastic job. In terms of the difficulty of this market to crack, so the way I tend to think of the market, is that you have these promotion sort of marketing channels in the front, then you go into these centralized personal profiles, then you have these monetization tools in the back, and then the back office to manage your audience, right? So what that means is that you have these marketing channels in the front, which are mostly social media today, right? TikTok, YouTube, so on and so forth, where a creator goes to, get their audience. Then you have these personal profiles, which today look a lot like bio links, right? So things like Linktree, Beacons.ai, where you aggregate all your audiences into your core content, right? So whether it's your personal website or a bio link, it's sort of the centralized place where all your monetization happens. Then you have these monetization tools. That's people like Kajabi, people like Teachable, where you help them build out the monetization, and then people can make money with that. And then finally, there's this back office where you might be managing your finances. So people like Stir, where you split money off between creators. It might be legal tech, for managing and brokering partnerships with creators and brands. People that help you build merch, right? All these sorts of things. But basically, they are the back office layer that administrates, the sort of business for the creator. Now, when I look at this market, I think there's enormous potential in the SaaS tools for monetization and the back office. And I think they're going to be extremely successful. But ultimately, there's somewhat of a cap to the potential of these businesses, because you kind of rely on the creator economy to expand massively in order for this to work, because most of those business models don't scale with the audience. They often charge subscription fees for more and more features, but they don't scale as your audience scales, because otherwise it would have to start charging commissions, and it stops making sense for the creator to pay for it. So these SaaS tools kind of have this cap to the potential unless the creator economy massively explodes to become much bigger. Then you have the threat of the marketing channels as well, where all these social media platforms are trying to eat into the monetization tools. They want to do more and more of the monetization themselves. So you have like YouTube building subscription, you have Twitter building super fans, all these types of things. And so these monetization tools over time will also face this threat of being eaten up from there. So look at this and go, SaaS tools, enormous opportunities right now, big reason why VC is putting in money, but over time there's a cap to their potential and there's massive threat for the marketplaces. The reason why we built Mana is that we felt first, that central piece in this whole market where there's this personal profile that aggregates all of your audience into your monetization tools. There's massive opportunity there because you can build lots of diverse monetization into that tool itself. And it can be the place where people funnel all their marketing to one place. But second, we're actually building our marketplace component a lot more. So we're almost a SaaS-enabled marketplace in a way. So we build a SaaS tool and then you have the marketplace in front. Because we think today the entire creator economy is facilitated by social media, and social media is actually a pretty terrible, very biased platform for people to attract an audience. It's fantastic for attention-seeking entertainers, but not very good for nutritious content and knowledge economy workers who want to sell themselves more. So we're spending a lot of time figuring out what the marketplace for knowledge economy actually looks like. So when we look at this, we go, we think the big opportunity is actually in cracking an alternative marketplace that gives exposure to all the creators who are not built to win in an attention-seeking entertainment market. And then also, in addition to that, building a SaaS tool that centralizes monetization effectively for people. So yeah, it's a very difficult market to crack, but I think there are big opportunities. And either way, you can make it pretty successful. So.
Correct. Yeah, I agree with Weska. I had the privilege of getting Weska from even on podcast. She came on episode number 187, and we'll put that in the show notes. And thanks for talking about SaaS tool. I think that's something which is definitely scalable, and we'll see going forward. How things pan out. And I quickly want to do the top three. What's your favorite business book?
The Mum Test. So it's a classic. It teaches you how to do user interviews properly. I always had my doubts about whether that methodology works. And then in the last 6 months, I've been following the Mum Test to the T, and has worked fantastically well. So I love that book. And I think everyone who's an entrepreneur trying to figure out problem, solution fit, and product market fit definitely should read it.
That's a first. We'll put that in the show notes, and I'll also try to read the book. And if you could go back in time when you started working on Mana, what is the one thing you would have focused on or done anything differently?
Yeah, I would have bootstrapped and started community first. I would have got a community of people who are interested in the same passion, focused on them, and try to figure out what their problems were, and then built the product around them, and then only raise money when I really got product market fit and wanted to scale. Looking back, I think I raised a little bit too early, and there's a lot of things still to figure out. So yeah.
Correct. And do you have any favorite online tool, for example, Gmail, Slack, Zoom?
Yeah, I think Notion. It's how we host everything on Mana. All our meeting notes are on there. We built our intranet on top of that. Our documentation is all on that. Everyone who onboards reads it through like that. And for creators, we have the same thing. We have a Notion space for them too, with all kinds of guides for them, and we show them our team and our internal workings as well through that. So yeah, Notion's fantastic, super flexible tool, and been pretty critical to running our company.
We'll put that in the show notes. James, what is the best way people can reach out to you and know more about Mana?
Yeah, the best way is mana.live/jameslo. That's my Mana page. You can literally book time with me anytime you want. You just click to my calendar and put some time in. And of course, if you want to set up your own Mana profile, just go on mana.live and you can sign up anytime.
Correct. We'll put that in the show notes. James, thank you so much for taking your time and speaking to us. I really enjoyed my conversation with you.
Great. Thank you so much. Great to be on.